My name is Jenna Hart. I'm 29 years old, and the night I discovered my boyfriend was betting on my heartbreak began with rosemary and silence. The kitchen smelled like home garlic sizzling in butter, rosemary sprigs crackling in the pan. But something about that night felt staged, like I was performing the role of a loving girlfriend for an audience that had already left the theater. Peter had been distant for weeks, the kind of distance that doesn't come with arguments or tension, just quiet detachment. I kept telling myself it was work stress. He managed a local gym Iron Haven, and he'd mentioned expansion plans, new investors, too many late nights. Still somewhere deep down, a small voice whispered, "He's slipping away from you." I ignored it. I always did. That night, I wanted to fix everything. I had his favorite wine chilling in the fridge and the cheesecake from that little bakery across town waiting on the counter. The candles were ready. My phone had died earlier, so I grabbed Peter's tablet from the coffee table to double-check a recipe tip about crisping chicken skin. As the screen lit up, a notification slid down from the top. Valkyrie's 27 new messages. I frowned. The Valkyries, I knew that name. It was what Peter and his two best friends, Chase and Dylan, called their group chat. A weirdly dramatic name for a bunch of gym bros, but I'd always found it harmless until that moment. The latest message preview popped up. Chase can't wait to see her face. $50 on tears. Her face. My face. I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen. My gut said, "Don't look," but my pulse was already racing, my curiosity sinking its claws in. The tablet unlocked with a swipe. The chat exploded open. Dylan. Is she home yet? You doing it tonight, Peter? Yeah. She's cooking dinner right now. Smells desperate, like she's trying to win me back with food. Chase El Mayo. The final supper, Dylan. You dropping the bomb after dessert or what? Peter, nah. I'll do it when she's done eating. I need to be free. Maya's picking me up in an hour. Maya. The name hit like a blade between the ribs. Maya, his gym's co-owner. The woman whose texts always came with urgent business and too many emojis. I'd noticed her perfume lingering on his hoodie once, a musky sweetness I'd pretended not to smell. My hand tightened around the tablet. The messages kept coming. Chase. Okay, but the bet's still on. What's her reaction gonna be? Dylan, $50 on rage. She looks like she's got a temper. Chase. Nah, she'll cry. Total meltdown. $50 on tears. Peter. You're both wrong. She'll shut down. It'll be boring. Easy money. The screen blurred. I blinked, trying to steady my breathing. They were betting on my heartbreak. I scrolled back further, the horror deepening with each word. Chase. Can't wait to see it. You gotta record it somehow, man. Dylan. Make sure she doesn't throw a plate at you first, Peter. Don't worry. She won't. Jenna doesn't do scenes. She freezes. I know her. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every memory, the late-night talks, his hand brushing mine, the way he used to whisper, "I love you." Half asleep flashed before me like cheap reruns. I thought I knew him too. But the Peter in that chat wasn't the man I loved. He was a performer, and I was his punchline. I placed the tablet down slowly. The chicken was burning in the pan, the smell turning from savory to bitter. I didn't move. I just watched the smoke curl upward like the last bit of warmth leaving the room. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even shake. I felt a clarity so sharp, it was almost terrifying. Peter wanted a reaction, rage, tears, drama. That was the game. But I wasn't going to play. I turned off the stove, opened a window to let the smoke escape, and sat on the couch. The ticking of the kitchen clock was the only sound in the apartment. I stared at the tablet still lit with their cruel laughter and thought of all the times I'd defended him to friends. He's just under pressure. He's not good at expressing himself. He's trying. No, he wasn't trying. He was testing. And now so was I. My voice was barely above a whisper as I murmured to the empty room, "You had your bet, Peter." I rose, unplugged my phone from the wall, and opened my banking app. The screen reflected in my calm, glassy eyes. Our joint savings balance blinked back at me, a number we'd been building for years, meant for a down payment on our dream home. It wasn't our dream anymore. It was my exit fund. I withdrew half into a new account under my name only. No drama, no warning, just a clean cut. When the confirmation email arrived, I felt something close to peace, like the first deep breath after being underwater too long. That night I didn't touch the food. I let the candle burn down to waxy silence. Then I made a list in my notes app. Passport, birth certificate, Jewelry box, bottom drawer. Laptop and backup drive. Photo albums. The watch Dad gave me. Each line felt like a quiet reclaiming of myself. I glanced around the apartment one last time, the soft lights, the couch, where we'd laughed, the kitchen filled with smoke and betrayal. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a set. And the scene had just ended. By morning, I'd already decided what to do. I rented a small storage unit under a fake name, paid in cash, and moved my essentials there while Peter was at the gym. No hesitation, no regret. That night, I cooked dinner again, this time for myself. A single piece of chicken, perfectly crisp. The rosemary didn't smell bitter anymore. He thought he was setting the stage for my breakdown, but I was already rewriting the ending. The next morning, the apartment looked the same, but everything inside it had changed. Peter still texted me his usual half-hearted "morning babe," followed by a photo of his coffee cup and gym schedule. I stared at it for a few seconds before locking my phone. He had no idea that the moment he placed that bet, our relationship had already ended. I spent the day in quiet preparation, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. While he worked his shift at Iron Haven, I became a ghost in my own home. The silence followed me like a witness as I went through drawers, closets, shelves, sorting what was his, what was mine, and what didn't matter anymore. I didn't take anything we'd bought together. Not the blender, not the framed vacation photo from last summer, not even the knit throw I'd picked for the couch. I only packed what belonged purely to me. My clothes, my laptop, my late father's watch, a small wooden jewelry box my mother had given me when I turned 18. By noon, I'd filled one suitcase and 2 boxes. The storage unit I'd rented the night before was only a few blocks away. I carried everything down the back stairs, avoiding neighbors. The man at the desk didn't ask questions when I paid in cash and signed under the name J. Hanley. It felt strange using another identity, but somehow it also felt right, like I was protecting the woman I used to be. When I returned, the apartment was still. The sunlight hit the empty space on the counter where the boxes had been. I made myself tea and sat in silence, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator. My pulse had finally slowed. That's when I started the next list in my phone. Financial. Joint savings transfer complete. Credit card separate account. Lease ends next month, cancel auto-renew. Every click, every note felt like a small act of liberation. By the time the clock struck 6, I'd transformed from the anxious girlfriend who used to wait for his text to a strategist with a plan. When Peter came home that evening, the key turned in the lock as usual. The familiar sound that once made my heart lift now sounded like the creak of a closing door. He walked in gym bag, slung over one shoulder cologne, and sweat mixing into that scent I'd grown to hate. He looked smug, rehearsed his eyes scanning the room as if mentally arranging the stage. "Hey," he said, his voice light fake. "Smells good." I nodded. "Chicken again." He chuckled, glancing at the oven. "You and that rosemary obsession." He had no idea that last night's burnt chicken had been the funeral pyre of our relationship. Dinner was quiet. He scrolled through his phone between bites, occasionally smirking. I watched him studying the man I'd once thought I knew. Every expression, every twitch of his jaw felt like a stranger's. When he finally set his fork down and cleared his throat, I knew the performance was about to begin. "Jenna, we need to talk." I folded my napkin and looked up. "Okay." He hesitated, clearly thrown by my calmness. This isn't working anymore. I feel like we've just grown apart." I let him talk. Every cliche poured out of his mouth with polished ease. "I need more excitement. We want different things. I can't be the man you deserve." It sounded like a speech he'd practiced in front of a mirror. When he finally said, "It's over," his shoulders relaxed. He was waiting for the show to start, the tears, the pleading, the trembling lip that would confirm the $50 he'd bet on shutdown. I just nodded. "All right." He blinked. "That's it." "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I understand." The confusion spread across his face like a slow sunrise. He leaned back in his chair, frowning. "You don't want to talk about it. You're not upset." "I think we've already said everything that needed to be said." I stood, took my plate to the sink, and rinsed it. The sound of running water filled the silence between us. "Wait, Jenna, hold on," he said, following me. "You're just gonna accept it." I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and met his eyes. "Yes." He looked genuinely unsettled now. His tone rose, desperate for some reaction. "Don't you have anything else to say? Anything at all?" I walked past him to the bedroom. The duffel bag I'd packed earlier sat by the door. I picked it up, slinging the strap over my shoulder. He stared, incredulous. "What are you doing?" I said everything I needed to say. "Where are you going?" "Out. The apartment, our stuff, the rent. It's handled." The words fell flat, emotionless, but I saw them land. He froze, mouth half open. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway. The click of the latch behind me was the cleanest sound I'd ever heard. No slam, no screaming, just the quiet punctuation of finality. The elevator ride down was long and silent. I could see my reflection in the mirrored walls, eyes steady, jaw relaxed. I didn't look like a woman who'd been left. I looked like someone who'd finally left on her own terms. Outside, the air smelled of rain. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in. For the first time in months, I felt light. I didn't look back. I walked to my car, put the duffel bag on the passenger seat, and started the engine. The headlights reflected off the wet pavement as I pulled away from the building that had once been our home. Inside, Peter was probably pacing now, confused, replaying every second of that conversation, wondering why I hadn't cried, screamed, or begged. He had bet on a reaction. He'd won his $50 on shutdown. But he had no idea what it truly cost him, because I wasn't shutting down. I was just getting started. The first morning alone felt unreal. I woke to sunlight spilling through unfamiliar blinds, a quiet far too loud for someone who'd lived with constant noise text alerts, clanging weights from gym videos, Peter's voice filling every corner of my life. Now there was nothing but stillness. The apartment I'd rented was small, sparse, a one-bedroom on the edge of downtown with creaky floors and a kitchen that hummed when the refrigerator kicked in. But it was mine, entirely mine. I made coffee using the cheap French press I'd grabbed on sale, sat by the window, and just listened. The city's distant sounds, horns, footsteps. A barking dog felt strangely alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's message or approval. I didn't have to monitor my tone, my timing, or my moods. Freedom, I realize, doesn't announce itself. It just exists, quietly. Still, the silence came with echoes. When I opened drawers, I half expected Peter's keys to clatter. When I made dinner, I caught myself reaching for 2 plates. My body hadn't yet caught up to my decision. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the chat messages in my head, every $50 on tears, every cruel laugh. I thought about all the small moments when he'd tested me without me realizing it. There was the time I cried after losing my father's watch during a move. Peter had smirked, kissed my forehead, and said, "It's just a watch, Jenna. You get too emotional about things." Or when I got the promotion at work, and instead of congratulating me, he said, "Don't get cocky, babe. I like you humble." All those times I'd folded my edges to fit inside his comfort zone. I used to think love meant compromise. Now I saw it had just been containment. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt myself piece by piece. I worked long hours, stayed late at the office, and began jogging every morning before sunrise. My body moved, my mind quieted, and slowly the air stopped feeling heavy. I blocked Peter on everything. Then Chase. Then Dylan. Every number. Every account. Every last trace of the people who'd turned me into a punchline. It felt ceremonial, each block like sealing a wound. A week later, I got a call from Riley, a mutual acquaintance. Riley wasn't part of Peter's close circle, just someone we both knew through the gym. The name flashed across my phone, and for a moment I hesitated. Then I answered. "Hey, Jenna," she said carefully. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine." There was a pause. "Peter's saying you, took money from your joint account, that you ghosted him out of nowhere." I stared out the window at the fading daylight. "He's free to tell whatever story makes him feel better." "I figured," she said quietly. "I didn't believe him. Just thought you should know." "Thanks, Riley. Really." When we hung up, I felt strangely calm. It was like hearing gossip about someone I used to know, not someone I'd loved. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Work became a refuge. I poured myself into projects and started to excel in ways I hadn't before. Without the constant emotional balancing act of keeping someone else happy, I had energy left for myself. My boss noticed. Promotions followed. I wasn't angry anymore, not even numb, just free. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, a breeze lifted the corner of my notebook where I'd once scribbled that first escape list. I reread it passport jewelry box documents and added one more line at the bottom. Peace. That night I dreamed of silence again. Not the suffocating kind, but the stillness of a calm sea after a storm. In the dream, I was standing at the shore, and somewhere behind me I could hear laughter fading. The laughter of people who once thought they'd broken me. They didn't know I'd built something out of the quiet they left behind. The next morning, Riley called again. Her tone was cautious but curious. "You won't believe this," she said. "What?" "Iron Haven's in trouble. Peter's partner, Maya, you know, the gym owner. She's having issues with the bank. Apparently, Peter overextended the lease. They're behind on payments. Equipment's getting repossessed. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity. Just a soft exhale. That's unfortunate, I said. Riley hesitated. You don't sound surprised. I'm not, I said. Karma doesn't need an audience. After the call ended, I went for a run. The city air was cool, sharp against my lungs. Each stride felt lighter than the last. I wasn't running away anymore. I was running towards something new, something I didn't yet have words for. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and studied the reflection staring back at me. My hair was loose, my eyes tired but clear. There was a faint smile there, not of joy, but of quiet knowing. I whispered to the reflection, you made it out. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. 3 months passed before I heard Peter's name again. It came as it always did from Riley. She'd texted, you might want to sit down for this one. I didn't. I just called her back. The moment she answered, her voice carried that mix of curiosity and disbelief that only bad gossip creates. Iron Haven is done, Jenna. Like, completely done. They padlocked the doors this morning. I leaned back in my chair, staring out my apartment window at the soft gray sky. What happened? Debt, she said. Turns out all that fancy new equipment Peter bragged about leasing, none of it was paid off. The investors pulled out. Maya's the one stuck with the bills, her name's on everything. He used her credit to open half those accounts. I could hear the faint sound of traffic behind her, like the world kept moving, while his had just stopped. Where is he now, I asked. Still with her, I think. Or maybe not. People say she kicked him out after the repossession notice. He was living in her condo, well renting it. The owner's evicting them next week. A quiet smile tugged at my lips. He always loved luxury he didn't own. Riley chuckled softly, but I could tell she was waiting for me to say something cruel, something satisfying. Instead, I just murmured, it's not my mess to clean up. It wasn't bitterness, it was truth. That night, I sat on my balcony, the city lights blinking below like faraway stars. The air smelled faintly of rain. I thought about how not long ago I would have obsessed over every detail, stalked his social media, tried to piece together what he was doing, who he was with. Now I didn't even care enough to look. The next morning, Riley called again. Jenna, it gets worse. I sipped my coffee. For who? For Peter, she said. Maya found out he emptied her savings before disappearing. He used the money to pay off his gym debts, and then he just left. She's drowning in unpaid invoices. I paused mid-sip. He left her. Yeah, took her car too, apparently. I closed my eyes for a moment. A strange kind of stillness filled me. It wasn't happiness exactly. More like a cosmic exhale, the kind you feel when the universe finally settles an old score for you. Riley, I said quietly, do me a favor. Don't update me anymore. She hesitated. You sure? I am. Whatever happens next, it's not part of my story. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the window. My own eyes looked different now, calm, unflinching. There was no trace of the girl who once burned dinner, trying to save a relationship that was already over. The next few weeks passed in peace. I worked, exercised, and started sketching again, something I hadn't done since college. Each line on paper felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. But peace, it seemed, never liked to stay untested. One evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. We need to talk about your stuff. And you took money that was for rent. You can't just do that. The audacity almost made me laugh. I stared at the message, remembering his smug expression across that dinner table the way he'd said I need to be free. Now he was the one scrambling for control. I deleted the message without replying. Blocked the number. A few days later, a voicemail popped up. I almost ignored it, but pressed play anyway. Hey, it's Chase, the voice began, sharp accusatory. Look what you did to Peter was really low. He's struggling and you just disappeared. The least you can do is be an adult and help him get back on his feet. You can't just walk away from someone like that. I almost laughed again. Man up, I thought. That was their favorite line, wasn't it? They'd bet on my tears once, and now they were angry I'd refused to perform. I deleted the voicemail. Blocked Chase, too. 2 nights later, another number buzzed through. Unknown. I can't believe you're ignoring me. You're really that heartless. You ruined my credit, Jenna. I hope you're happy. You selfish. I didn't finish reading. Just pressed block. There it was, the mask off the entitlement laid bare. Peter didn't miss me. He missed control. The days that followed were quiet again. Golden quiet. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, and watched the sunset from my window. The peace wasn't empty. It was full of my own presence, finally undisturbed. Then one evening, my phone rang again. Another unknown number. For some reason, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, I answered. I didn't speak, I just listened. For a moment, there was shaky breathing on the other end. Then a voice I hadn't heard in months. Jenna. It was Peter. The confident tone was gone, replaced by something raw, uncertain. Please. I know you're there. I need help. The words hung in the air. He continued, voice trembling. Maya's gone. She left after the bank called. I owe people money. A lot of money. Chase won't even answer my calls. I don't know what to do. I stayed silent. He kept talking, his voice breaking into hiccups and half sobs. Please, Jenna. I messed up, okay? I made mistakes, but you can't just ignore me. You're better than this. You always were. That line almost made me laugh. The flattery, the manipulation, it was his old reflex trying to breathe. When silence stretched too long, his tone hardened. Say something. You owe me that much. Still, I said nothing. Then came the words that ended it all, the unfiltered truth he'd been holding back. I lost $500 on you because you couldn't even react like a normal person. There it was, the core of it, the confession. It had never been about love. It had always been about the game. The quiet between us felt endless. Finally, I spoke, my tone calm even. Sounds like you have a problem. He sputtered. What? That's all you have to say. I waited a beat, then said, that 500 you lost. Consider it a cheap lesson. Before he could respond, I hung up. Blocked the number. And that was that. The next morning, the sun poured into my apartment through thin curtains, warm and soft. I made coffee, opened the window, and breathed in the air. No tension, no guilt, just peace. Peter had made a bet on my heartbreak. But I was the one who cashed out. The days that followed his last call felt weightless, like a long-held breath, finally released. The silence wasn't something I had to endure anymore. It was mine, chosen. There were no more unknown numbers, no more guilt-laced voicemails, pretending to be apologies. Just the hum of the city outside my window and the quiet rhythm of a life that finally belonged to me again. Each morning, I woke up early, brewed coffee, and stood at my window while the sunrise painted gold across the rooftops. The peace wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with fireworks or revelation. It just was. And yet it was everything I'd been missing. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before Peter. I'd always said I didn't have time, but the truth was, I'd stopped making space for the parts of myself that didn't serve someone else's comfort. Now my small apartment slowly filled with canvases, abstract bursts of color, wild and imperfect. I hung them on the walls, each one like a scar turned into art. One afternoon while cleaning, I found a folded piece of paper tucked in an old jacket pocket. My handwriting, a list. Essential documents, laptop and hard drives. Grandfather's watch, jewelry box, bank joint account. It was the list I'd made the night everything fell apart. The handwriting was calm, almost neat, as if written by someone detached from her own heartbreak. I stared at it for a long time, then I smiled and tore it in half. I didn't need it anymore. That evening, Riley called again. We hadn't talked in weeks. Hey, stranger, she said, lighthearted. You disappeared. I've been good, I said, honestly. She hesitated. You probably don't want to hear this, but Peter showed up at the gym last week. Well, the new gym. Not his. Looked rough. Word is he's working part-time at a warehouse now. I said nothing. Riley continued. Maya filed something against him. Fraud, I think. He's on the hook for tens of thousands. I said, taking a sip of tea. You really don't care, do you? I smiled faintly. Not anymore. Wow, she said softly. I envy that kind of peace. I didn't answer right away. I just looked around my apartment, the walls lined with art, the clean countertop, the unshared bed, and realized she was right. Peace wasn't revenge. It was clarity. After the call, I sat by the window as the city lights flickered on, one by one. Somewhere out there, Peter was unraveling, still chasing someone to blame. But I wasn't his mirror anymore. I wasn't anyone's lesson or bet. I'd stopped being part of his story the moment I'd chosen silence over spectacle. He'd wanted rage tears, a scene worth gossiping about. But what he got was nothing, just the quiet consequence of losing someone who refused to play his game. That was the thing about men like Peter. They believed control was power. But real power wasn't about who could shout the loudest. It was about who could walk away and never look back. A week later, I went to the storage unit for the first time since I'd left him. When I opened the metal door, dust swirled in the air. My boxes sat exactly where I'd left them untouched. I went through them slowly. A few photo albums, my father's watch, old sketchbooks. One of them had a half-finished drawing of Peter's face, soft lines, shaded eyes that once looked kind. I looked at it for a moment, then tore the page out and fed it into the small trash bin by the door. Some stories didn't deserve to be finished. When I left the storage facility, the sun was setting warm, golden, like the world itself was exhaling. I stood there for a moment, feeling the light on my face, and realized I didn't need closure from him. I already had it. He'd gambled with love like it was a game. He thought he'd walk away with a win. But love isn't poker, and heartbreak isn't currency. You don't lose when you leave someone who bet against your worth. You win by refusing to play. That night, as I climbed into bed, I whispered the words I'd been waiting months to say out loud, softly, just for me. I'm free. And for the first time since that rosemary-scented evening, I believed it. The silence that filled the room wasn't lonely. It was whole. It was mine.